The Fiery Debate Over Islam's Identity, Pakistan's Intellectual Battle. In a fiery intellectual showdown in Pakistan, ignited by a controversial policy mandating the hijab for female students and teachers in Pakistan administered Kashmir, two columnists, Khurshid, Nadeem, and Shahnawaz Farooqui grappled with Islam's identity and its societal role. Nadeem, in his piece titled Everyone Has Their Own Islam, subtly criticized the policy and urged Pakistan to reassess its priorities, stating that Prophet Muhammad, quote, raised societal standards so high that practices like usury and slavery eventually became untenable. He also touched on the diversity of Islamic interpretations and the patriarchal inclinations in Muslim countries. In rebuttal, Farooqui, a more conservative Islamist, said in a piece titled, quote, The Islam of the Agents of the West, defended traditional values and countered that core Islamic practices have remained steadfast since the Prophet's time, questioning the portrayal of patriarchy as inherently negative. He also accused the West of hypocrisy, asserting, quote, it is men that corrupt women, and criticized its portrayal of women as sexualized entertainers rather than leaders. The two pieces and the hijab policy have collectively fueled a spirited debate on the interaction between Islam, culture, and Western perceptions. So, this is an interesting um, piece that I found that basically talked about and discussed this kind of editorial back and forth that happened in between these two Pakistani intellectuals. And there was first this piece by what's his name? Khurshid Nadeem. And Khurshid basically was saying that he was just highlighting the discrepancy between how Islam is interpreted and enforced in certain Islamist groups in Pakistan, and then what he perceives to be the actual essence and priorities of Islam. So he was basically saying that we have all these Islamists that are celebrating that we're now making girls and teachers in Pakistani Kashmir, we're forcing them to wear the hijab, and we're celebrating this as a good thing and um, kind of showing how committed we are to Islam as a nation, especially in this particular highly contested region, right? And he was basically saying that this is superficial and that he argues that real Islam is more concerned on societal benefit in terms of economic markers than these like tokens, so to speak. So he basically says that one of his arguments is that in Prophet Muhammad's time, it would have been impossible to ban slavery because of the economic conditions in which he lived, right? But he argues that the Prophet Muhammad, through his teachings and through his lifetime and through his rule, raised the moral standards of the society so much that such ugly economic necessities became um what's the word I'm looking for? Like intolerable. So eventually they were rejected because they managed to raise the economic situation. And so he starts talking about how why are we putting these things into girls' education? Have we not learned from Iran? Have we not learned from Afghanistan? In a country where we have as much dire situation, as much turmoil as Pakistan today, in this day and age, why are we focusing on this? We should be focusing on the economic benefit and prosperity of women and girls because this would raise our profile as a nation. And this would actually, in his interpretation, be following some of the traditions of the prophet. And he also goes on to make comparisons, basically saying, like, why is the Pakistani Islam like this? Islam is not like this in Morocco. Islam is not like this in Saudi Arabia. It's different everywhere. But why is it like this here? Why are we taking this interpretation of it when maybe we should be taking an interpretation that is actually more beneficial to our society? And then this other guy comes in and he had some words. Okay. So first of all, this the conservative guy's name is Farooqui. He I will summarize his points. He goes off. And personally, in my opinion, I don't think he engages deeply with any of the points that Khurshid Nadeem actually made. I don't think he engages with it at all. But so he first off goes on defending that Islam is a heavenly religion. He's like, let me first make it, let me put you on notice, okay, that the West tries to say that this isn't a real religion, but this is a real first of all, he gets put on notice. Okay. Second of all, he gets put on notice again because he goes off saying that no, Islam is the one religion. It has been consistent over time. The Quran has been preserved. It is a miracle. All that stuff, right? So he has to maintain. We have Tawheed. Okay, this is the whole point. This is monotheistic. He like really calls out Khurshid for being questionable. Okay. Second of all, then he goes on to basically critique this more liberal Muslim specifically as an individual. And then he goes on to basically just say that he's influenced by Western thought and he only thinks this way because of Western thought. And he doesn't even know how much he is influenced by Western thought. And then he goes on to basically not engage with any of Nadeem's points at all and just says that you're influenced by the West and then starts attacking stuff that he says is from the West. So then that begins with saying, who said that patriarchy is a bad thing? Why is this a negative thing? He says, if this was so negative, the prophet and the companions would have condemned it. But they didn't, so it's fine. Then he does the standard thing of going into a critique of the Western gender and social roles as he sees it, basically saying that, oh, if you think our society is so patriarchal, what about them? Are they not? And then he's like, they don't have like women leaders. How many women have won Nobel Peace Prizes? This big prize in the West, like only 17 out of hundreds of men. Like, and then he does the classic like, oh, women in the West aren't valued as mothers. Instead, they're just urged to be porn stars, like that kind of thing. And ultimately, because Nadim, the liberal guy, was saying it is we treat women this way because we treat them as better in the confines of four walls because we say that women corrupt men. And that's why we treat them this way, in this patriarchal way, because we're defending of men's honor in a way by keeping women so constrained so that men are not tempted, right? And then the conservative Farooqui goes on to say he's basically like, no, it's actually men that corrupt women because women go do these things. If women rebel against society, it's because a man encouraged them to do so. If they become mothers, it's because a man wanted them to. If they remain pure, it's because a man mandated it. If they become whores, it's because a man wants it. This is his argument. So it's basically the whole thing of like, oh, well, the West is just commodifying women, so who are you to speak? So now that I have given the summary of that whole battle, Armin, what do you think?
Wait, I'm still confused about the Prophet Muhammad part. Can you elaborate on that part? Like, what is
Which part
because
specifically?
that sounded like blasphemy to me. Like, I'm worried for this man's safety right now in Pakistan. What it was talking about Muhammad being strict and all. Like, what is he? He said something about Muhammad having the standards of Prophet Muhammad. Like, what was that about? Can you elaborate?
Okay, so I can't read the whole thing because I read the translations of their editorials, right? But basically, he's saying that in society, given our material conditions, there are always going to be aspects of our economic situation that are not desirable, right? So in the Prophet Muhammad's time, an example of that would be usury and slavery. So he
Yeah.
said he basically he's saying that in the Prophet Muhammad's time, it was impossible for him to outright ban slavery because of the economic conditions of his environment and time. But what the
Okay.
Prophet Muhammad did do was throughout his lifetime, throughout his teachings, throughout his model to humanity, he raised the moral standard of the society to a point that the society then went on to reject these things. So he's basically saying
Oh.
through the Prophet Muhammad's model, they
Okay.
became
Okay.
intolerable even though the
Okay.
Prophet did not ban.
Not the standards. Okay, because it sounded like the standards were becoming intolerable. I thought no, no. So the slave. So he's giving credit to Prophet Muhammad for why slavery and other crap like that eventually. Okay,
Even though he
like
didn't outright ban it himself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're basically your average reformist Muslim that comes up, tries to give the credit of modernity to Islam or whatever.